Good morning and welcome to the Honorable Ministers of the Council, members of the media, St. Martin Gov Radio listeners via St. Martin Gov Radio 107.9 FM and respective radio stations island-wide, also TEL TV Plus Channel 15 and online viewers. I'm Charity Dunker, and welcome to the Live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, August 20th, 2025. At this time, I'd like to invite the Honorable Minister of Public Housing, Spatial Plan, Environment and Infrastructure, Patrice Gums Jr., to address you. Good morning, Minister Gums. You have the floor.
Good morning. Good morning to my colleague minister, members of the press, and to those viewing and listening public. Very brief comments. The first regarding disposal bin schedule and the passing of Hurricane Erin. I am pleased to announce that the various teams within the ministry were well prepared for the passing of Hurricane Erin last week. The water levels of the pond were down a day in advance, and trench and waterways were cleaned. In addition, the government received the final legal checks, and the sailboat on Simpson Bay was removed in time for the storm. In parts of the Ebenezer Main Trench, which had not been regularly cleaned for years due to damage, and more recently the hillside collapse, was able to be cleaned, mitigating flood risks for the residents. Thankfully, we were spared the full potential of Hurricane Erin. Though we were spared, a number of things became clear, and some good lessons were learned, especially as it relates to waste collection. I would like to remind the public not to put their trash outside if they miss the last pickup time of their hauler before a storm or hurricane. Trash not only is unsightly, but will become scattered, or even worse, can become a projectile during a storm. I would like to invite all persons to visit my Facebook page and that of the Ministry of Rummy to find a schedule for the big bins that are designated for bulky household items in the various neighborhoods. These have been available since the beginning of August. There is also a schedule that reflects where the bins are that are designated for vegetation and other cleared trees. I'd also like to remind everyone to remain vigilant and to prepare well in advance as more storms are within our region, systems within our region. Finally, regarding the public consultation that I announced last week in press briefing, I'm happy to confirm the location of the public consultation on the landfill, what is commonly referred to as the EDMP, Emergency Debris Management Program, which will take place on September 3rd at the Bel Air Community Center. A gentle reminder, the idea of this consultation is that a summary of the discussion and the next steps will be shared with the public to ensure transparency as St. Martin moves forward towards a cleaner, safer, and more sustainable waste management system. You are, of course, all persons invited to attend in person or via the live stream to share your views, and your concerns. We are, of course, seeking your valuable input at this stage as we work towards a brighter future. It will take all of us. See you on September 3rd. And these conclude my statements. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister Patrice Gums Jr., for your opening remarks. At this time, I'd like to invite the Honorable Minister of Tourism, Economic Affairs, Transportation and Telecommunication, Grisha Helga Martin, to address you. Good morning, Minister. You have the floor.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning to the media. Good morning to my colleague minister. And good morning to Swaliga Land. I want to start off by firstly stating that we are saddened by the loss that occurred yesterday in the government building. My thoughts and prayers are with the family and loved ones as they face this sudden difficult time. And I also want to recognize the compassion and professionalism of those who were present and responded under such challenging circumstances. May the family find strength and comfort in support and prayers that surround them. And may we all as a community continue to show care and respect for one another. As we begin the 2025-2026 academic year, I extend warm wishes to our students, teachers, and school leaders and parents. To our students this year, this is your time. School is not just about lessons, but also about friendship, growth, and building the foundation for your future. Cherish every moment. To our teachers and school managers, thank you for shaping minds and inspiring the next generation. Your work is not easy, but it is priceless. To our parents and guardians, never forget that vital role you play. Education begins at home, and through your guidance and encouragement and example, our children learn that discipline, respect, and effort open doors to many opportunities. Education is the key to breaking barriers, creating possibilities, and building the future of St. Martin. Together as a community, let us nurture that future with hope, strength, and purpose. I wish everyone a safe and successful, inspiring school year ahead. Swaliga Marketplace Update. I would like to provide a brief update on the Marketplace project and in response to the recent commentary in the media. I am pleased to confirm that construction has resumed in full swing and the contractors are actively on site and the project is expected to be completed within 6 to 8 months. I'm also pleased to share that the Royal Caribbean Group has provided their required approvals for the project to move forward, and we thank them for their continued partnership. As you may have noticed, the tarp was taken down just last week in precaution to Hurricane Aaron. It has remained down while we continue to monitor the two upcoming systems, and if it is confirmed that they pose no threat to our area, the tarp will be reinstalled immediately. In the meantime, we kindly ask the public for patience and understanding, as there may be some inconvenience in the area while works is ongoing, and vendors will continue to be updated through the WhatsApp group and as previously mentioned. Next, hurricane season reminder. As we all know, June 1st throughout November 30th is the Atlantic hurricane season, and at a time that we are well familiar with, but one that always requires vigilance. Just last week, we were fortunate that Hurricane Aaron did not significantly affect us, and we count our blessings. However, as we approach the peak of the season with several systems already being monitored, I want to remind the community of a few key points. When government issues to prepare homes and businesses, this does not automatically mean that businesses must close. The decision to close rests with each business based on what is best for their employees and their operations. If the civil servants are released early, like we did last week, it is to give them time for their families and secure their homes so that they are ready and clear-minded to serve if needed, as most civil servants are often used during this time of preparedness, hurricane. So businesses should not interpret this as a blanket closure order, but formal closure instructions will only come if EOC is activated or an official emergency is declared. So we are not new to this, but preparedness guides from the EOC and the Disaster Management Office continue to provide clear reminders. So as Minister of TIAD, I encourage businesses to review their protocols, communicate with your staff, and be prepared to act should watches or warnings be issued. And also rely on the official government channels for accurate information. Finally, I want to thank the workers and management who went above and beyond this past weekend to assist guests that were stranded due to canceled flights. In particularly, the PGIA team who worked tirelessly with professionalism and care to ensure passengers were taken care of. On behalf of St. Martin, thank you. Staff, stay safe, stay prepared, and let us continue to look out for one another this hurricane season. Next, I move on to updates on the economic licenses and backlog and the reopening of our front desk. I'm pleased to announce that I'm pleased to update the public on the progress made at the Department of Economic Licenses. 6 weeks into our efforts to address the backlog, I can report that approximately 75% of outstanding files has now been cleared. We began with over 500 licenses pending, and about 300 of which required additional information from clients and other departments. Over the past weeks, staff and summer students under the government's BOP program reached out to clients by phone and email, setting clear deadlines for submissions. Where clients did not respond, their applications may now be considered incomplete and possibly not processed further. We also contacted more than 200 clients who already received approval but has not yet collected their license. They were reminded that failure to collect could eventually lead to cancellation. Public reminders will also be shared across government's platform and media this week. During this period, the department piloted an online submission option. Nearly 100 applicants have been already submitted digitally. This is throughout the 6 weeks while we closed the front desk. And applicants are being contacted to confirm receipt of or advice of their resubmission that if it's necessary. So what was once 15 to 20 minutes in person, often with multiple return visits, can now be completed online 3 to 5 minutes at the applicant's convenience. Safeguards are also in place. Applications that are incomplete or incorrect will be declared null and void, with notifications sent by email to prevent future backlogs. This step toward digitization is part of the country package reform, specifically Measure E6. It allows us to test, improve, and prepare both the department and the public for full digital transformation. As part of this shift, updated licenses requirements will be published on the government's website this week, along with tutorial videos and frequently asked questions to assist applicants. This is the R4 effect in action, reshaping processes to be more efficient, transparent, and accountable. I'm also pleased to announce that the front desk of the Department of Economic Licenses will be reopening this coming Monday, August 25th, at the Public Service Center. Going forward, no appointments are needed. Clients can simply take a number. However, please note that the submissions will only be accepted digitally. The front desk will now serve as an information desk, focusing on the following: guidance on how to apply online, clarity on license type, assistance with annual business licenses, extension invoices for companies established before 2024, issuing invoices for new businesses established in 2024, and general inquiries regarding application status. So for assistance, the public may also use the following options: submit applications online via the department's webpage, which is www.stmartingov.org/ministries/departments/pages/Department of Economic Licenses, and visit the government building for guidance at the information desk, which is Dell, or they can also visit the SEDC office at Bush Road, Unit 2 by Miss Lally Center, commercial, and they can assist you to also submit it digitally. They can submit you directly. So a detailed press release with all this information will be issued tomorrow. I thank the public for their patience and constructive feedback during this transition, and I especially commend the dedicated staff of the Department of Economic Licenses for their commitment and hard work. And together we're moving closer to a streamlined, transparent, and digital system that will make doing business in St. Martin easier, one step at a time. Lastly, I want to discuss the public transportation update, the confirmation letter process, and the way forward. So earlier this year, I think it was July 25th to be exact, January 25th to be exact, the confirmation letter process was reinstated as part of our efforts to clean up the public transportation sector and gain a clearer understanding of the industry. This became more evident or more important after the former administration lifted the moratorium on taxi and bus licenses. As mentioned in my previous press briefing, the reports from the Integrity Chamber and SOAB were shared publicly with industry stakeholders so everyone can see the recommendation. Since then, I have continued to work closely with the Inspectorate of Economic Transportation and the Department of ETT and the Department of Licenses, DEL, on the way forward. As a result, IETA has announced that the issuance of confirmation letters is now suspended until further notice. I want to stress, this is a suspension, not a cancellation. Permit holders who submitted documents before the August 8th deadline are not affected, especially those adding or replacing vehicles. The suspension will be used to consolidate the data, finalizing a cleanup, and prepare the way forward for updated policies. It It is also important for the public to know that by law, permits unused for more than 6 months may be revoked permanently or temporarily. This is under Article 16, Paragraph 3 of the National Ordinance for Passenger Transport. Out of fairness, we have allowed well beyond this 6-month period for compliance. That was January to August. At the same time, we are cross-referencing permits issued in 2023 and 2024 before my tenure to determine how to handle those cases legally. For anyone that is unclear on their status, I encourage them to please contact the IETA department directly at their offices across Fairway Market or via WhatsApp, phone number 559-7685. That's 559-7685. So I want to give just a little brief synopsis of just the taxis right now. So key data that we've verified. So since the confirmation letters was issued, we were able to assess that we have now registered over 600, a little over 600 taxis, as opposed to what we assumed was 521. Right now in our system, we have over 600 taxi drivers registered. Of the 600 and something taxi drivers registered, 400 and something of them has been issued confirmation letter. What we did with the 400 and something, we did something called a KYC, so know your customer. We went and we did a full cleanup, and we were able to pull of the 400, 247 clearly their ages, everything completely a full breakdown. So I want to give, that's like 65% right now of the 400 that is now legally operating. Of that, that's about 400, that's about 247 persons. So let's give I want to give an overview of what our taxi drivers look like. This is just the case by the taxi. I'll be giving a full breakdown maybe in our next press briefing once we have this completely detailed. So by age group, and we're looking at verified 247 out of the 400. Age group, age 21 to 30, 2 taxi drivers. Age 31 to 40, 14 taxi drivers. Age 41 to 50, 40 taxi drivers. Age 51 to 60, 42 taxi drivers. Age 61 to 70, 70 taxi drivers. Age 71 to 80, 67 taxi drivers. Age 81 to 90, 7 taxi drivers. Age 91 to 100, 1 taxi driver. Let's do a breakdown by citizens. Dutch citizens, 233. Dominicans, 3. French, 1. Guyanese, 2. Haitians, 5. And Jamaican, 3. By country of birth, St. Martin, 85. Curaçao, 31. Aruba, 27. Haiti, 18. Dominican Republic, 14. Anguilla, 9. St. Martin, northern side, 12. St. Kitts and Nevis, 11. This data helps clear the misconception, just this part, that the majority of the permit holders are Dutch nationals. So, however, this data helps clear the misconception. The majority of permit holders are Dutch nationals, just so you know. I wanted to clarify that. However, there is a concentration of drivers in the 61 to 100 range, or 61 to 80 range, raising questions about long-term sustainability. So of the 400 permits issued, of the 400 that we know that received the forms, only 75 of them have assistant drivers. 40 of them are those that are assisting age 65 and up. So of the 400 that we receive, 75 of them have assistant drivers, and of that 75, 40 of them are assisting drivers that are 65 and up. So what's the way forward? I just wanted to give everyone a little overview, but I will be giving a full details for the buses as well moving forward. And I want to also mention for the record, during the cleanup, we were of the assumption we only had 200 and something bus drivers. We have over 300 and something bus drivers. So again, we are in a market on the Dutch side with over 600 and something taxi drivers registered and 300 and something bus drivers registered. Let that sink in. So what's the way forward? We have decided a 5-phase plan of approach. Phase 1, data verification and compliance review. We're doing that between July and August, that full cleanup. And once I have that complete cleanup done, I will again come back and inform the public. So this cleanup means clean up transportation permit records, verifying compliance with insurance, road tax inspections, establishing a database of active versus dormant. Phase 2, which sets to happen hopefully between August, September, is permit rationalization and driver certification. So revoking of non-compliant dormant permits with appeal process, launch certification programs on island knowledge, customer service safety, and require medical checkups. I'm going to be making that mandatory. Phase 3, which is set to happen in Q3 and Q2 or Q3 of 2026, legislation framework. So draft amendments to the passenger traffic ordinance, pilot mandatory digital dispatching. So I'm going to be launching a digital dispatching. It's going to be mandatory. And of course, all of these I'm going to mention is going to be with stakeholder engagement. I will not announce these things unless I sit with the stakeholders and have their opinion as well before we go into making it mandatory. But it will be mandatory. And then phase 4, which is also around 2027, is submit finalized legislation to Parliament, consolidate into a unified transport policy. And then phase 5, which is set for, I think, 2028 or late 2027, create a central authority to oversee public transportation. So a transportation authority will be in the future implemented. And the transition responsibilities from government to the authority. So that means no more government interference with the transportation. There will be an authority in place with laws to support it. So timeline at a glance is between 2025, the cleanup and the certification. So 2026, we're looking at law drafting and dispatching pilot. And then 2027, final law pass and transportation authority established. That's the 5 phase that we plan to take, and we will be informing the public accordingly and engaging with stakeholders. So at the same time, we're strengthening collaboration between DEL, my 3 departments, or our 3 departments, DEL, IETA, and the receiver's office to ensure database are consistent and protocols enforced and standards upheld. And the confirmation letter process will remain an annual exercise to ensure compliance. And in closing, I want to ensure the public and the industry that this matter has my full attention. And it's going to take some time, but we're going to get there. My team and I remain committed to building a transparent, accountable, and sustainable public transportation system, one that serves residents and visitors while protecting the integrity of the industry. Thank you, and I look forward to any questions.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister Grisha Heilige-Martin, for your opening remarks. If you have just tuned in and joining us, you're watching the live Council Minister's press briefing for today, August 20th, 2025. Thank you for joining. We now move on to the question and answer session, whereby I'd like to invite the Member of Media, Ms. Bibi Hadshaw of SMN News. Good morning, and you have the floor, Bibi.
Good morning, Charity. Good morning, ministers, colleagues. My first question I'll ask to the Minister of TED, Ms. Heilige-Martin. I first want to ask a clarification, then my question. In breaking down the transportation cleanup and having received the 2 reports, SOR Bay and Integrity Chamber, I'd like to know if, since making that report public, if you are aware of any criminal investigation taking place. That's the clarification. And then this GEBE saga that we are all talking about, every politician, everybody talks about GEBE today. As the Minister of TIAT, is your ministry or you personally involved in regulating the cost and prices to fuel sold to GEBE and the fuel clause? Because, of course, the ministry is involved in regulating the prices at the pump, but what about the cost of fuel to GEBE? Can you expound on that?
Thank you, Bibi, for your question. With regards to the investigation, that's not in my purview to even announce or decide, but the information is public. If you have read the reports, I mean, I guess that's up to now the Justice Department to decide if they're going to take legal action or not. But it's clear, and I guess we'll have to hear from them where that that is concerned. As for GB, yes, I am involved. BTP has been also. I've sat with the Prime Minister to discuss BTP was the one that did the full breakdown of the fuel clause, and this was, of course, already submitted to GEBE. Right now, we are waiting to hear. Right now, we are in a back and forth as to where we're going to go, and I think I'm going to leave that part up to the Prime Minister. I think in a meeting tomorrow in Parliament, and he will discuss and give a full breakdown of where we are. But of course, price control and price rates related to GB does fall under the Ministry of TIAT, and I am for sure, most definitely working in collaboration with the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance and the Minister of Rum, because we're all involved where that is concerned.
Okay. Thank you, Bibi, and also thank you, Minister. Moving on to the next member of media, Mr. MLE of Island 2 Radio. You have the floor.
Thank you. So, Minister, I'm going to stay with the track that on public transportation. There's been quite some discussions in previous years, rumors, speculations that permits have been handed out to, as thank yous, as compensation for support, those type of things. So, a couple of things. In your investigations, have you found permit holders who have multiple permits? Are there companies that I'm talking about buses and taxis? As I understood the law, the permit holders operating a bus or taxi is supposed to be their sole source of income, not a supplementary source of income. And there's a difference between individuals who are too old, who can't drive, who hire a hub chauffeur, versus individuals who rent out taxi licenses or bus licenses as, again, supplemental income. So in your investigations, are you finding those types of issues coming up? Licenses being rented out, licenses being used when it's not their sole source of income, permits issued to companies instead of individuals, and individuals or companies that have multiple permits?
So that verification process, we're doing that, know your KYC. That's exactly what we're busy doing right now, because now we have their names, we have their crib numbers, we have all this information, and now we are already doing a deep dive where that is concerned. And that I would have to, the outcome of that I will have to bring at the next time. But yes, you are correct, because I think even the Integrity Chamber mentioned exactly what you stated earlier, that it could have been, that most of these were given the time period of as to when it was issued, 3 months before election, that it could have been done then. But those that were issued then were issued on mostly on an individual basis. And those that have multiple bus and taxi licenses have been issued way before. How do we tackle that legally? We're still busy analyzing that. So I can't really make any comment on that right now. But we're that deep dive that we're busy doing that verification phase in the next maybe next 2 weeks or so, I can come back and give a full explanation as this is the amount we have. And then based on the full cleanup within there, these are the people that are, that they are compliant with the policy that's there. That they don't have, because I'll be very honest. In one or two of cases, I've seen that they have other jobs and we are addressing those. So we did find a few of them.
So you are starting to find
Yes.
instances of these.
That's exactly, and that report is what I'm going to also be issuing to the public. This is a full cleanup.
Thank you, Emily of Island
you.
92 Radio, for your question posed to the minister. Moving on to Ms. Bibi Hadshaw of SMN News. You have the floor, Bibi.
Thank you, Charity. Minister of Romy. Minister Gums. I noticed that there are lots of side roads in Coal Bay area being done, being paved, Manjack and several others are being paved. However, what I don't know, but I'm getting a lot of feedback from residents and people in this area, is that government signs a contract with contractors. They have the type of work or the amount of work that have to be carried out in each road. But then when the time comes to do the job, that's not the case. The contractor does something totally different. So what I want to ask you, is government conducting any kind of control as to see if government is getting its money's worth, the value for what it's paying for? Because up to last night, a road was supposed to be paved in Coal Bay, and the only thing the contractor did was try to fill, I think, a few holes. So I'd like to know if you guys are controlling, if there's any form of control taking place, and if government is getting its money's worth.
Thank you, B, for the question. Indeed, as part of all government projects that are undertaken, project management is a key component of this, of all projects. The project management actually is undertaken by the Department of New Works. I haven't heard any complaints about what contractually has to be done has not been done. I will bring this information to my team at New Works Department and ask for their reports about anything that's come up. But in fact, and indeed, yes, inspections are supposed to happen regularly. There are supposed to be certain benchmarks that are achieved throughout the process. There's also a certain amount of work that has to be achieved before you can disburse a certain amount of funds. And with every project within government, a certain checklist has to be achieved, i.e. the benchmarks, before that disbursement can happen. So the project is managed within a certain structure. I haven't heard complaints as stated, but I will, of course, take this information back to the team to see how we can sort of verify these statements being made. So thank you.
Thank you, Bibi, and thank you, Minister. Mr. Emily of Island 92 Radio, you have the floor.
Minister Gums, thank you for informing that the boat in Simpson Bay has finally been removed. By my estimate, it's taken 1.5 years to remove the boat. There's also been some discussions about car wrecks on the island. That's also a very time-consuming process. Is there any thoughts from your perspective how you can streamline this process? And also, for example, you know who the owner of the boat was? Is government going to do anything to try and recover costs or damages from that? And same thing for car wrecks. You can find their VIN numbers. Although they take the plates off, you can find the VIN numbers. You can find out who owned them. So you can always go back to them to recoup your costs.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the question, Emil. Let me address first the issue of the car wrecks. I think it's something we've been discussing quite a lot in the Council of Ministers, that the impression is sort of given that car wrecks are not being removed. In fact, what's happening is that we're removing car wrecks almost daily. The reality is, and I keep stressing this a lot in my press statements, garbage is not government's problem. If we don't look at our role in garbage disposal, what we put out, what we allow to put out, if you see your neighbor has a car wreck and you know that he's put the car wreck there in March, and now we're in August, a whole year later, the car wreck is still there, inform government, let government know. Not that necessarily you want to be sort of an informant to government, but also recognize that the problem is not necessarily government. Government is supposed to kind of collect the garbage, the car wrecks, but oftentimes the plates are gone, but the VIN numbers are scratched off. But we are something that we regularly clean up. I made a mention of a figure actually about in the 5-digit figures of how much money is spent annually on average on car collection. That is an astronomical number in my view, and it's something that we are addressing through regular controls, but also within the waste ordinance, which is a part of the larger sort of landfill EDMP project. is actually the fact that the waste ordinance we have doesn't really give ROMI the legal power to issue fines. So what ROMI can do is basically write a letter asking whoever, if we know the owner of a vehicle or any kind of waste, to basically remedy the situation. Otherwise, it has to go through the side of justice. And of course, that is a very long trajectory, given that via the prosecutor's office and justice system, there's a lot of other cases which have a higher priority than, for example, a fine regarding a car wreck. But we are actively working. Again, what I recommend is that come out on September 3rd as well. And that information will also be shared about how basically the waste ordinance is going to become a tool to help us as government not only sort of look at the idea of bringing home the message that garbage is everybody's concern, but also what we as government will do as a tool to make sure we mitigate and find those who kind of create this situation for the whole community. Regarding the boat on Simpson Bay Beach, very interesting story of that boat indeed. The boat was damaged, was to a VKS officer. He in turn sold it to a gentleman with government actually has been for quite some time back and forth trying to, the newer person is indeed, for all intents and purposes, the owner. Having finally found him, he was unable to make that removal happen. That finally happened. That very long, lengthy process was concluded just beginning of last week, end of actually 2 weeks ago. Last week it was concluded, the legal things that had to happen, and then we managed to move the boat on Tuesday or Wednesday. Regarding how we're going to improve this, and I think we've had a discussion with the Minister of TEAT, there really needs to be an increased cooperation between ROMI and especially TEAT in the Maritime Affairs Department, because persons are coming into the island with a boat, and then, of course, leaving the boat. So it becomes a maritime issue when a boat comes in. If the boat is abandoned or left uncared for, it becomes a ROMI problem because now it's a wreck. So the minister has actually initiated a meeting between myself and her as well the harbor, to see how we can streamline this much better, because in essence, what it means, we have to enforce better our controls of our waterways, also includes the Minister of Justice, of our waterways, and also in terms of our management, because then essentially what it becomes is the lack of follow-up on the side of the owner becomes a tax burden in the end for the taxpayer of St. Martin. We also noticed that there was a statement made that no boat should be docked in Great Bay at the passing of Hurricane Erin. I happened to be in the area doing some checks ahead of the hurricane, and we noticed that a boat was coming inside and actually mooring right in the middle of Great Bay Harbor. So it comes a question of enforcement and capacity, and we are working diligently to address that between the three ministries.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you, Minister. We now enter into our third and final round of questions, whereby I invite member of the media, Ms. Bibi Hardshaw of SMN News. You have the floor, Bibi.
Thank you, Charity. Minister, I have a two-part question for you. Bear with me.
No problem.
We are in the peak of the hurricane season, and while you're talking about what's going on in the maritime section and car wrecks and everything, one of the things I haven't heard from the ministry is what exactly are you doing with the Pondfield Road? We have a number of vendors, a lot of trucks, some tents. Are these things movable structures? Does government control? What about the benches, the grills, and all the barrage of things that we see along Pondfield? What exactly are you doing about that? Now, my other part of the question, which is a question by itself, Minister, a lot of residents, businesses, developers have been complaining diligently about your ministry. People are basically frustrated, especially when it comes to the denial and the backlogs of your permits. Too much denials. The question is, are you against development on St. Martin? And then I'd like for you to tell me if you consider the loss of jobs among locals on St. Martin, contractors, construction workers, masons, all of that, if you have taken any of it into consideration when denying all these permits across the board.
Thank you very much, EB. For the first question regarding Pondville, indeed, we actually have a whole discussion going on about the future of the entire island planning, spatial development, which falls under my ministry. The vendors in Pondville in particular, we've had a number of discussions about that. We've actually looking at solutions towards that. I've asked my Department of Domain Affairs to provide me a list of those vendors who have rental agreements, because a number of them indeed are not there legally, or they've also built structures illegally on what is permitted within their vending and rental license. One of those in particular, at the beginning of this year, was asked to remove a structure that was built illegally, and it was. So I think what we're busy right now doing is basically making sure that what is allowed is there, who isn't allowed, we begin notification that they don't have a rental agreement and should not be there. And then the phase 2 is also, as part of the bigger cleanup of Phillipsburg and beautification, is actually to find a solution to how to properly accommodate all vendors. What you notice, indeed correctly so, a number of the vendors, the food stalls on the Pondville, they're actually currently in an area where there's some erosion along the trench that poses not only a hazard to themselves, but also a hazard to our waterways for managing stormwater. So we are diligently working on that. And rest assured, we are going to find a solution where everybody feels included in the process. One of the things we don't want to do is sort of ad hocly take anybody away from their location, because of course it is an economic means for them to survive. But we want to make sure whatever we do is done in a very fair and transparent way. So that's for that. Regarding the backlog of permits, and again, I think this continuous narrative that I'm against development, and I've stated it several times, I think here, the media, the parliament floor, I'm not against development. My family for decades have been in construction development. I could never be against what has been part and parcel of me being able to stand here. What I have stated I'm against is unsustainable development. I think a lot of what you see here and what people complain about is the result of unsustainable development. With regards to a number of the denials, none of the denials have ever been about anything unless it is not permitted. So, for example, if someone if someone is requesting a building permit for an area where it's not allowed, if someone has a request for a building density or what they're doing is hazardous to the environment and the community, it's not going to happen. I understand, of course, that there are a number of persons connected to construction field, but I cannot in good faith allow construction to happen if then the next question next week will be, Minister, you allow this construction to happen and the Ebenezer Hillside collapsed. So you have to understand there's a balance called sustainable development. When it comes to the idea of denying building permits, that's not the case at all. I'm not the first minister to deny building permits. I won't be the last. I am the first minister to find a balance between what has happened in the past and where we need to go. This also includes, for example, looking at the existing draft zoning laws. We know for a fact, and we've discussed it within the ministry, I'll have a more, I actually coincidentally have a whole discussion about that planned for next week's press briefing. But we do have we're very much aware of the restraints and constraints around space and development. We are looking as well as finalizing our draft zoning. We are going to actually review the existing draft zoning for a number of areas in particular where we see that the existing height levels, for example, 3 or 4 stories, is not necessarily in line with what's happening in and around the area, our population demands, our tourist demands, and essentially the lack of space. We have to find a balance. So again, just to reiterate, I'm never against development. I've never been against development. Some of them are very beautiful developments, be they small or very large condo developments. I think what I'm very much and have for a very long time stressed is the importance of doing it sustainably. Why? I'll give you a prime example. When things don't happen according to plan, they cost government money. We just spent 400,000, almost 500,000 euros to fix a collapsed hillside in Ebenezer because basically there was an issue of the manner in which it was excavated, the lack of retaining wall, cost the taxpayers 20 years later, 500,000 euros. So it's never against development, it's making sure that we do it the right way to save money for other things like healthcare, education. And that's really the bigger picture. So anything that impacts the workers, the construction workers, I understand, but also recognize we're also looking at different solutions to ensure, and we're working very closely with all developers, be they large or small, to actually get them in line with what has to happen. And it's working quite well. All denials that have come thus far have really been those which have been really unacceptable. Environmental standards, health standards, and if really and truly things like if someone wants to be on top of a hill or a ridge, that's also a concern because 10 years later, we might have a erosion issue. So again, I recognize the concerns regarding the denials. Regarding the backlog, we actually, I've addressed this earlier too, the number of permits actually coming out of the ministry remain consistent. What is now in backlog actually is because of the reintroduction of civil works. A number of persons are now basically on pause because civil works permits have now become a very key feature in all developments. Though passed in 2021, there was never a clear outline as to how to apply civil works permits. As I mentioned about 2 or 3 press briefings ago, civil works permits manual is being finalized. We're actually in the phase now of review by the collective teams to have it clear and going forward, the whole entire process, to make it a lot more streamlined. On top of that, we're also working toward the whole digitalization process because, in fact, what you see happening is people submit building permits in very large boxes. They are manually processed. There's a capacity issue. There's also a space management issue where if you have all these files, chances are documentation is going missing and with limited capacity. So the backlog is not at all due to anyone sort of not wanting development. It is really managing the fact that we have a very small capacity for a system that doesn't match the reality of St. Martin. Recall that our building code is from 1935. So the timelines within that law, the methodologies within this, how we evaluate building permits, it doesn't match St. Martin 2025. What would once happen in 1935 is a house is built every year. It's a square box with 4 windows. We now have 1 house every hour. So the methodologies have to change. We are addressing within the ministry, and we actually are looking for external support for that. We've investigated different opportunities, possibilities, including even third parties to help us with the backlog. All, of course, in the effort to kind of make it a lot better because we are aware of the challenges. But indeed, it is something that we're constantly working on. The ministry has even come in at this point on weekends to fill this backlog. But as you can imagine, the second biggest industry in this island is construction. So there is an issue with, there is, of course, a very clear issue of demand versus what we can manage within the ministry currently.
Can you give us an update also on Westview? This is a project undertaken by locals, and months now they had a building stop. Where are we with that?
So Westview is resolved. They've received their building, civil works permits quite a number of months ago. So they are continuing their efforts on their construction. But again, I want to reiterate that everyone needs to follow the process. It's not that anyone is being targeted at all, because that's kind of the narrative that has revolved around Westview. And the reality is that with all good intentions, the ministry actually reached out and told them, submit, we would expedite. And the course of action was, we're taking you to court. The very short initial court hearing indicated, in fact, what we did was completely legal and correct.
Thank you, Bibi Shah, and also thank you, Minister. Mr. M.L. Lee of Island 92 Radio, you have the final question.
So first, a clarification question. So, Minister, you mentioned that September 3rd at Bel Air, but you didn't mention a time. And a question for you. In last week's press conference, you mentioned that you've hired a consultant to help with drafting the Waste Authority ordinance, but yet you're doing that public consultation on the vision now. So it seems kind of contrary, and in terms of shouldn't you have that consensus on the vision before you hire the consultant to draft the ordinance?
No. Okay, so just let me clarify. What was the first question again? It was
The time for you.
Yes, I think it's 7 p.m. But I think we're sending out something officially again this week, but I do believe it's 7 o'clock until 9. 7 to 9 was, I think it was dated last week, but indeed 7 to 9 I believe is the date. Regarding the consultation basically is very much about the landfill intervention. So this consultation has several different facets. It's basically about what the landfill is going to look like. So the physical intervention, so closure, what height the landfill, the current landfill will look like. Then there's component 2, which is more the background, so the legal framework, the financial framework. All of these things basically have to happen regardless of whatever the landfill looks like. So if someone comes and says, Minister, you said you want to put the landfill at 13 meters, it should be at 10 meters. Regardless of those consultations, which will happen, which is the main focus of this consultation, we still need to have a waste ordinance which basically defines things like what is and isn't allowed to be thrown out, and also the teeth, which is basically, if you do this, you're going to be fined this. That's really completely disconnected from what the landfill looks like.
But
yeah,
if I might, just for clarification, for example, as far as I know from your ministry, there's been no statement as to whether you're going to do incineration, are you going to do waste to energy? I mean, that vision will heavily impact what the waste ordinance would look like. So wouldn't it make sense to have some public discussion on that?
Not necessarily. I mean, they're all aligning now at the same time. But what's very critical is that whatever we decide within the waste ordinance is very much a base document about what you are allowed to do. 'Cause the current waste ordinance is basically a 2-pager that outlines how you're supposed to, what is not allowed in terms of disposal. The feedback basically from the consultation will feed back into this in terms of the long-term plan, but the incineration versus recycling versus waste to energy, that's something that's also more of a long-term plan. So it's 3 components. As I said, there's 3 components. There's the physical intervention, there's the legal and financial framework, and then there's what is the future of waste on St. Martin. Those 3 all have to come in together, but in the end, the waste ordinance doesn't necessarily govern the daily operations. It's really a high-level document about fines, things like household surcharges, dumping at the landfill or not. So it's more of a high level versus the operational daily manual. The Waste Authority ideally also is being part of this whole consultancy. This is also to craft the entity, which similarly to what happens in Aruba and Curacao and other Caribbean countries and around the world, an independent authority that manages your waste, regardless of if you're incinerating or not, that has to be existing. And then finally, the financial framework. How are you going to fund this? That is the part that's going to also be, that's the part that's going to be very much dependent on the solution, but that's more of a long-term plan that's planned to be delivered at the middle of next year versus the legal, which is going to be the end of this year.
Thank you. So my question is for the Minister of TIAT. I've had quite some conversations with people in the business community about their interactions with TELEM, and they're finding that TELEM seems to be challenged in terms of how they're managing some of their third-party relationships, which is impacting the services that they're offering to some of the businesses. And I'm also hearing that the financial situation in TELEM seems more and more precarious. Can you comment as to what does the financial situation at TELEM look like, and what's your prognosis for the future going forward?
Yes. So I don't want to put everything out there, but financial situation. First, let's go through what happened with TELEM in the past. They were supposed to. I think the idea that they had to let go some of the staff, more was let go than was actually. I think they had they let go more than they needed to. So they have more. They have less staff. I think it's under a little over 50 or over or under 50 staff, and I think they wanted to remain with about 70 something, but they were right now at 50. So they're a bit at a skeleton kind of a thing. That's the situation right now. Financially, that that lifted a heavy financial burden for Telem financially, more than they accounted for. And I think that and their financial situation now is not one that they have a financial issue. The issues right now is the mobile system needs to upgrade, and that is where they are right now, where they need a little more assistance from government, which we are busy which we're busy in discussions with. And once that discussion is clear, support from government. And it could mean, and it means in a lot of different areas. It doesn't mean financial injection. It means different support system mechanism that government will be putting in place to assist them to invest into the new projects that they want. And once I personally believe, and I'm not wearing my former Telem hat, but I truly believe that once Telem has now been able to secure and invest in the new projects, by next year, Telem should be running seamlessly. But we're right now discussing, and we're going to leave that for once the agreement is done on how we're going to move forward between government and Telem, and the minister that's over that will be the one to inform you accordingly. But we're just in an area of how are we going to move between now to get to that positive thing, that impasse. That's where we are. It's not that I still feel hopeful for Telem, and I still believe Telem will make that breakthrough once we give them the much needed support they need. And that's just as much as I can say now. So I don't give up on Telem as yet, is what I would say. Yes? Good.
Thank you, Emily of Island 92, for your question, and also thank you, Minister. Honorable Ministers of the Council, members of the media, radio listeners, and online viewers, this brings us to the end of the Live Council Ministers Press Briefing for today, Wednesday, August 20th, 2025. For a rebroadcast, be sure to tune in to stmartingov.org, St. Martin Gov Radio 107.9 FM, Telem's Tel TV Plus Channel 15, the official Facebook page of the Government of St. Martin, and YouTube channel Government of St. Martin for video on demand, and do tune into our YouTube channel, Government of St. Martin. On behalf of the team of the Department of Communication and the Government of St. Martin, I'm Charity Dunker, bidding you a pleasant day further.